Yo, how you doing, folks? Welcome to episode 98 of the Simpa Life Podcast. It's out slightly later. I'm going to get this turned around today, edited and released for you fine folk. I've been chasing some guests for a while, and we're pushing back. And obviously, as you've seen, I'm kind of revisiting some of the more lively, more interesting guests. That's not to say any of my other guests have not been interesting. No offense to anybody. But today's guest has been someone that's been top of my list to revisit for a while, but actually trying to grab hold of him is near impossible because I don't think his feet have touched the ground since last time we saw him, spoke to him in, March last year. So it's been quite a while, so there's a lot to catch up on here. Without further ado, we will move on with the introduction for today's guest, who is a qualified and award-winning trainer, counselor and consultant offering addiction support, family therapy, mediation, drug and alcohol awareness, and harm prevention training, as well as a multitude of many other things that we will momentarily get into. They are George Charlton. How are you doing, brother?
I'm all right, man. That's always quite the introduction, that, because I don't kind of see myself as that sounds. I'm all right, man. I'm buzzing that we're able to have a chat again. I'm loving the setup, Simpa. It's looking really good. I'm not the only one who's prolific as well, because you're bashing these podcasts out all the time. But I'm good, man. I'm currently, where am I? I'm currently in the Holiday Inn in Bolton at the minute. Came down on Sunday afternoon and doing some work developing peer-to-peer naloxone programs down here. So I've been involved in working with Greater Manchester NHS Foundation Trust, who are right behind the peer-to-peer approach. We've mobilised 4 peer projects in Bury, Bolton, Salford and Trafford. So I've been across Bury, Bolton and Salford today with a bunch of people who use drugs who just fucking light me up, right? They absolutely light me up. So we're out in the community talking about people who use drugs, talking about opiate users, talking about drug-related deaths, telling people about naloxone, which is a drug which kind of reverses overdoses, and then training and supplying people on the streets and giving them kits. And it's fucking epic. It's mint. I love it. And my favourite quote is, find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I guess that's how I feel. It's a bit shit being stuck in hotel rooms. It's a bit shit being away from my family so much. But it's not a job, mate. It's like a vocation. It's about saving people's lives, isn't it? So it's special.
It's a calling in a lot of ways, I guess, as well. And I think, as we were kind of discussing in the prelude to this before we started recording, that we're in such an interesting time where people, I suppose, like ourselves, that have unique insight and experience are suddenly coming to the forefront, because we're seeing now, we're circling the drain with policies. They're rehashing. Obviously, they're now going, we'll take their driving licenses and their passports. So it's like your mum coming in and taking your pillows away because you won't turn the light off at night. It's just so childish.
Yeah. I think, you know what it is as well, though, Simpa? I think it's it's perverse, man. I really think there's something fucking very perverse around a drug policy that, on the most part, certainly for the client group that I represent, kind of people who are disenfranchised through addictions, I think there's something very perverse about, like, we want to cause them more pain, we want to cause them more trauma, we want to cause them more hurt, we want to make their life more difficult. You know, I mean, that headline for the new 10-year drug strategy, from like harm to hope, you know, it sounds mint, doesn't it? But like, when you get into the mechanics of what it's about, there's a real incongruence between like some really good stuff, but then some really bizarre stuff. And like that idea about, like, I'm sure that the then Home Secretary Priti Patel, in her introductions around the Harm to Hope document, said something about, like, we want to create world-class evidence-based like treatment services. But I kind of think, well, how the fuck does taking somebody's driving license off them or passport do anything to stop them from taking drugs? If fucking Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines, right, gives legal fucking grounds for people, death squads, to go out and murder fucking drug users, doesn't do anything to reduce drug use in the Philippines, what fucking chance do we have here of someone taking your fucking driving license away? And then also, how does that do anything from harm to hope? Surely that means if you can't get you had your driving license taken off you because you've got a day or 10 on there driving under the influence of drugs, then you lose your fucking job. Like, how does that mean that? How is that hopeful?
Yeah.
How does that not cause more harm? It's weird. It's really fucking weird, brother.
It is. It's a bit sadomasochistic, and the only way I can think of it is that it's a kind of almost a mutation or bastardization of kind of fundamental extremist Christian beliefs. And it's that you have committed the sin, therefore you have to be punished for the sin. And that's not in the legal realm. That's in the you should suffer. The common refrain we are often hear from, especially, unfortunately, older Tory voters or older, typically more right on the neoliberal spectrum, sort of with their political leanings, they typically say, well, they chose to do it. They injected it. They sniffed it. And it's just this... It skips to the end. It's like, how can you introduce compassion and understanding and empathy? They just go, well, no, they did. And it's an insanity. Yet if it was their kid and they just one time at a party just happened to say yes, oh, it was peer pressure. Oh, and they'll come up with every other excuse other than, no, a human being saw an opportunity to do something, thought about it and made a fucking decision based on it.
Yeah. And you know what though, isn't it? And then it really is bizarre that kind of like we have the blinkers on, like when you think about that idea of people using C2H5OH, you know what I mean? Like we all use that drug, right? That drug there causes more fucking harm every year than all illegal drugs combined. We have like fucking drugs litter projects to fucking remove that stuff. To come round mine on a fucking Friday, and the amount of fucking alcohol bottles that are in people's fucking recycling bins is just unbelievable. We've got drug consumption rooms on every corner in the whole of the fucking UK where people are drinking that chemical formula, which is ethanol, sitting having a pint, slagging people off who take a bit of coke or a bit of fucking MDMA or a bit of ketamine. Do you know what I mean? And we've been Diageo's done the best fucking marketing job of them all, haven't they? Do you know what I mean? Because we think that we're consuming, and I'm a consumer of that social lubricant. Do you know what I mean? I enjoy that social lubricant, but it's still a drug. It's still extremely dangerous, but we don't criminalize you for fucking drinking it. What we do is we tell you about the harms, we put labeling on there, and we put kind of regulation around it to stop young people from drinking it and getting harmed. And then if you act like a dick, you act like a dick, and there's some consequences. So why don't we extend the same courtesy to people who use cannabis, who use ketamine, who use MDMA? I mean, I think MDMA probably killed around 121 people last year, and was kind of responsible. It's unfair to say killed them, right? I'm not that qualified to say that, but those were the death figures attached to it. Like there was 9,500 people who died from fucking alcohol consumption. Why is alcohol not class A, but yet MDMA is? And I think how can we ever be coming from a place of like any integrity or like talking about evidence-based policy when the Misuse of Drugs Act's it's not grounded in science, it's not grounded in fucking evidence. And I think it's one of the only pieces of legislation in the whole of the UK government portfolio that's never been reviewed for 50 years. Like,
yeah, it's been, even when they've amended it, they haven't reviewed it, which is not the procedure that they work on. So yeah,
and it's, I don't know, man. I just think it's like I think it's madness. You know, taking drugs is risky. We're not saying that. We're not saying that it's not. Do you know what I mean? Mountain climbing's fucking risky. Driving a car fast's risky, but we don't ban those things. Do you know what I mean? We don't punish people from doing those things. We offer a kind of a harm reduction approach where we give information, advice and guidance to keep people safe. But I kind of think, you know, like it's painful to see the government kind of like, it feels like they're dipping their toe in the water around harm reduction. Do you know what I mean? But they're a little bit frightened to kind of to go all in there. But then we always come back to that thing around like there needs to be a level of like punishment. And for me it is really, I think it's quite perverse.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know, I was going to make a massive assumption of my listeners there, but we've all got kinks in the world, and some people are its power, its domination, its control. And I think, unfortunately, by the nature of the infrastructure, the apparatus of government and rule making in general will draw people toward that. And it is often, unfortunately, the people who are given Home Secretary position or drug policy or whatever are often the ideologues. They have an opinion, an agenda prior to stepping into the role. They're not then going, all right, I've been put in charge of drugs. Let's have a look at this drugs thing. They step in going, drugs are bad. People that use drugs are victims and need saving. And they just can't, they seem to do the same thing that the vast majority, that everyone does. I mean, if you look at statistics, even things like heroin, and even so, we're seeing obviously a warped statistic anomalies in America with like benzofentanyl and stuff like that, because obviously that's a whole next level of shit. But the general dependency of things is at the highest is around what, 30, 35%, 40 at a push of the populations. And even then, though the people, you've got indicators, we could figure this out early. Where you had trauma in childhood, did you have other issues with dependency on other substances? Well, there's many multitude of ways that we could map out this and identify the vulnerable population. And it's the same as I often go back to nuts. We found out people are allergic to nuts. We went, all right, shit, label everything that's got nuts in. And the people who've got a nut allergy, make them aware of it and they'll avoid nuts. Yeah, people still die and have those reactions, but they also have an EpiPen, which is analogous to naloxone if you're then going to use opioids. So it's why then...
But we don't ban nuts, though, do we, Simba? We don't people are getting harmed because of eating nuts. So the solution is, let's ban fucking nuts. It's actually nuts to think like that. You know what I mean? But like when it comes to like heroin, for instance, like we can or like diamorphine, it's like we can't make those sweeping statements that because like a percentage of people are dying that we need to ban that drug outright, It's like, it's crazy, my mum was a heroin user. She was like, I think she was 76, 77 when she died, and she was a daily heroin user for 10 years, right? She used to get a heroin from the doctor. It was called diamorphine. She got it to treat her pain. She didn't have to piss in a pot to prove that she had fucking that opiate in her system. She didn't have to take that drug in the fucking chemist in front of the queues of people who were standing behind waiting for whatever it was, so the confidentiality wasn't fucking breached there, you know what I mean? She wasn't treated with fucking disdain. The doctor used to give her it without problem. And the reason that happened was because she was a nice old lady who had grey hair and she used to make jam tarts and wore a fucking apron, but she still took fucking opiates, prescribed opiates, heroin, which she got without any problem. But why, when somebody ends up with like the pain and the trauma, which we know kind of like 10 or 15% of people who use drugs globally are using based on trauma and pain of sexual exploitation or abuse, or they've been hurt, they've been in bloody war, civil war, they've seen murders, whatever. We feel like what we've got to do with them people is make their life fucking tougher. Like, what the fuck's that about? Like, why can't we treat those people with the same courtesy as we did my old mum? Do you know what I mean? And it's fucking... And what we do in that instance is we find a solution to be able to use diamorphine in a really fucking positive way with the likes of like the diamorphine assisted treatment program, heroin assisted treatment in Middlesbrough. We see the impacts that project has on a fucking cohort of people who are entrenched in their addiction, who had like massive health problems, who are entrenched in their drug use, in the criminal justice system, lots of like wound care issues, like they were a mess in the community, and we give them access to a treatment which is transformative in their lives, to stop committing crime, to stop injecting in an irresponsible way, to build their relationships with their families, they become productive members of society, they become fucking naloxone peers with me, they start using their lived experience to educate doctors, right? We were on calls with loads of doctors who were saying we've never had education like this delivered by people with lived experience of addiction, and their lives improve. And then what we do is we go, you know what it is? Let's pull the fucking funding on that thing. And you know what, right? It's crazy, right? Costs about £12,000 a year to put one person through diamorphine assisted treatment, right? It costs £65,000 a year to put one person in the fucking criminal justice system. And what we've done at fucking Foundations, right? Not by the choice of fucking Danny Ahmed, and I feel heartbroken for Danny and the team at Foundations because he was a trendsetter. Northeast of England, first place in the UK to do it. Danny put so much work in. What we made a statement was, whoever it was that pulled the funding, here's a good idea. Let's start putting people back in jail for £65,000 a year when we could put fucking 5 people through diamorphine-assisted treatment for the cost of sending one person to prison. There's just another example of the fucking madness that exists in all of this stuff, because it's back to that thing about being perverse. We don't want to make fucking life easy for people whose lives are fucking broken. It's what's going on, man? What's going on? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, when you again, this is one of the reasons I thoroughly enjoyed every conversation we have, because you see the world as I do, straight through that bullshit, and it's difficult. I mean, obviously, you're fortunate in the sense that, I say fortunate, because of what you do and the way you operate, there is no time for that cloud to gather again and the doubt or the other voices or anything to build. But I've had this argument with countless people at different levels, in whether it be, I'm like, I've fallen out with that organization, so I'm not going to name them personally. It's kind of personal spat. But anyway, but there's a couple of people at different organizations that basically I've kind of gone, I disagree with what you're doing. This is drug exceptionalism. You're basically saying that our drug good, other drug bad. Yep. You can't predicate your business model, which is what it is at the end of the day, on the suffering of others, perpetuating that suffering. You have to identify that if it is fine, that even the alcohol argument's one thing, but now we're at the point if they've gone, oh, well, yeah, cannabis in certain circumstances, that's fine, but on the street, it's skunk and it's dangerous. Or ketamine on the street, that's dangerous, it kills people at festivals. Oh, but $6,000 in our clinics. Or DMT, that's a horrible drug, people go psychotic from it. Oh, yeah, but we've got research for our round 3 funding. Or MDMA, dangerous festival drug, kills, as you said, hundreds of people a year. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, we're doing it. It's all a con, and it's back to exactly what you said with your mum and the doctor. And I've been trying to unpin this thing. There's a reason I haven't released episode 3 of this series that I'm working on, is I'm trying to prove this narrative that I'm showing, like, the invention of the plunger hypodermic needle occurred in the mid-1800s simultaneously by like a French and a Scottish doctor. And there's then this trend of cannabis as a medicine across the world growing in relevance, then the patent and creation of diamorphine, the patenting of then the needle technology, and then the mass prescribing of a standardized dose. At the same time, the opium becomes then criminalized. So all they've done is create a legal cartel. They've pharmaceuticalized it. They've medicinalized it. And I fear right now what I'm trying to articulate to the world and struggling with is that's what I feel they're doing with cannabis, is they're going to medicinalize all of cannabis. And the idea of it being just something you can do as a drug, you're not allowed. You have to have the excuse and the reason. And I think they're going to try and create that exceptionalism that, oh, the drug is fine if you buy it from us and you take it in our assisted, like you're saying with the assisted therapy, has to be in front of us, the exact dose. We're going to check your pockets, make sure you didn't sneak any others. You can't take it with any other drugs. It's absurd. It's absurd.
Yeah. And to me, what it is, I can't talk that much to kind of like the cannabis reform and stuff like that, but kind of it is like, I know that like your guys, and maybe you can educate me here, but I think there is a little bit of concern around kind of like that we're going to kind of look to provide opportunities for people to have cannabis, but then there's still going to be stuff which is wrapped around it, which is still a real restriction in some ways, like you've just said there, that it's got to be used for medical purposes. Do you know what I mean? And then kind of it's got to come from like GM Pharmaceuticals or places such as that who've got the monopoly on this medical grade cannabis. But it kind of still like it's still really frustrating, isn't it, when you think about like how many people died? I've got no idea how many people died from smoking cannabis last year in the UK.
Thousands must be. No, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's mad, isn't it? It's mad that like, and I think the thing for me, man, look, I think I'm an old bloke now. I'm getting old. I'm looking pretty good. I've been fucking pickled in white lightning over the years. I've found that much. But I think like for me, right, like, I've been on a bit of a personal journey in terms of like who I am in relation to this stuff, so I was a drug user who fucking loved taking drugs. I loved partying. I loved going to the raves. I had really wonderful experiences taking MDMA. Like I used to thoroughly enjoy having a joint. I had the nickname of Budgie Lung by me mates because I could never do the fucking hot knives. I would end up coughing. I was pro drugs and I'm still pro drugs. Do you know what I mean? And there came a time for me through my drug use where it wasn't, where the recreational or the enjoyable elements for me went into an area where it was about like, I was hurt, you know what I mean? I started using substances, I feel, for different reasons. I was irresponsible in terms of my drug use. The environment at the time was like you shouldn't be taking drugs. A bit like now, if you get caught by the police, you're going to get caught. You're going to end up in the shit. I did get caught by the police. I did get criminalized for my drug use. I found it very difficult to get jobs. I got involved in acquisitive crime. I ended up sent to prison for my drug use, and I ended up spiraling, and I ended up like absolutely out of control. For a dependent drug use. I was a dependent drinker. I was assaulted, I was stabbed, I was hurt, I kind of went on this whole crazy journey, and then went into rehab in the year 2000, stopped using substances, but I was still a fucking mess, you know what I mean? So I ended up I ended up doing a lot of therapy, and then I ended up a drug user advocate, right? Like activist, right? But I was an angry one, right? I was fucking shouting, this is fucking terrible, and that's fucking terrible, and pointing out all of the same arguments that I point out now, but from a place of being a really angry man, right? And for me, I guess like my journey now has taught us that we're never going to do anything by getting angry, right? And that doesn't mean that the state of play currently isn't anything we should be angry about. We should be angry about 4,589 deaths last year. We should be angry about kind of the 1,330 deaths in Scotland last year. We should be angry about the 17 people who die of a needless and avoidable drug-related death today and yesterday and tomorrow. We should be really, really angry about that. But we have to recognize that anger does nothing but to kind of shut us down from people who we can influence. Do you know what I mean? And I think for me, like where I'm at in terms of my journey right now is like the arguments that you have, the arguments that I have, the arguments that people like Steve Rolls, Transform, Neve Eastwood, Danny Ahmed, lots of wonderful like advocates who we have up here and us kind of guys, wherever we are, wherever we sit, right? The way that we have to do it is we have to flirt with people, and I think that we have to take people on a bit of a journey. And that's the way that I'm choosing to do it now, So I'm blessed, man, right? I'm blessed that I'm in positions of influence with lots of the national drug treatment providers. I'm working with all of the big treatment providers, the Change Grow Lives, Turning Points, We Are With You. I've not recently got on as a non-executive director at Kaleidoscope, the biggest kind of drug treatment service across the whole of Wales. I'm working with Westminster Drugs Project. I'm working with fucking Humankind, Greater Manchester NHS Foundation Trust. I'm kind of working with all these right now. I don't know how the fuck I'm doing it, but anyway. But what you find is with these organizations is like they want to make some changes as well. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of the recognition that like the same old isn't good enough. And I kind of feel really privileged that I'm in the position to be able to work with them, but not just kind of say, oh, this is George Charlton's view, because I kind of position myself with people who use drugs across the UK to listen to their voices and to be able to be in a position to influence and help those organizations to have confidence to try and do new things. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Wales at the Senedd, right, with the drugs minister down there who's got the national drugs portfolio. I was in there with an amazing, like, me sister from another mister. She's mint, you should get her on. You should get her. She's called Rondine Molinaro, right? She's absolutely fantastic. I'll make the introductions, right? Simpa, she's fucking amazing. Rondine's the head of operations at Gwent Drug and Alcohol Services. Her backstory is just mint, right? She's an amazing personality. But her and I were in the Senedd and we were talking about kind of the development of peer-led projects, right? Peer-to-peer naloxone programs, peer-led enhanced harm reduction projects. And we were talking about the successes that we've had in Wales. There's been some really amazing, like, user-led projects going on in Wales. And we did our thing, and at the end of it all, after the minister and that had gone, one of our aides turned around and said to me, he said, you know what it is? I said, what? He says, I think that's the first time anyone's ever said cock in the Senedd. I said, I'll fucking have it. I'll have it, right? Because I think the thing for me is like, I want to take people on journeys where we can kind of we can talk about the big problems and the difficult problems, but we can make people smile, we can make people cry. I'm not convinced that reading the 64-page Harm to Hope document does anything to change people's views, but actually when we can kind of find ways and means of people who are impacted by drug use or people who are drug users, and we can put those real voices and those real videos and pictures of those people in front of them, it gets into their hearts, man. And I think that's where we change policy, is through common sense and getting into the hearts of ministers. But I'm definitely going to get a T-shirt that says "I said cock in the Senedd."
Nice. Yeah, and that's exactly it is. It's through humor, and it's through humanizing, and it's through humbling that we find and recognize that collective and that shared humanity. And I think that's one of the things that you do so bitingly. It's when you spoke at our event in Durham, the reason I wanted you on first was exactly for what you did, is you prepared the crowd and you shocked them into a reality that is for thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, their lived experience day in, day out.
Yeah.
And I think there are means and ways to do that. I think I'm still early in my evolution. I'm less angry than I've been. I'm still obviously angry internally about these things, but I'm learning how to use humor, humility, and and just these kind of conversations with this platform, with the other work I'm doing, to try and just advance the conversation ultimately. And I think that's what is, the more we can discuss it, we can talk it, then we can figure the way forward. You know what I mean?
I hear you, brother, honestly, and I think that's the thing for me, I think you have mellowed a bit, actually. It's kind of like, but you know what, right? Like, this platform that you've got here, it's like you're the Joe Rogan of kind of like drug policy reform, and you're a bit better looking as well, do you know what I mean? But anyway, look, man, I think the thing for me is like what you do really well is like you get a real like breadth of different kind of voices, do you know what I mean? And we talk truth to power, don't we, in some ways, but we kind of do that through kind of giving people information, allowing them to kind of make sensible choices. It's not like that you have loads of people on here going, oh, drugs are fucking great and there's no danger at all. It's like, it's not even about that, we try and do things in a really balanced way. But I feel like, I feel that we're in a very different place, right? I think that I was speaking to a lass yesterday who was doing a master's degree, and she was just kind of wanting to just to talk through a few things, and it kind of got me thinking about like, just that since I got like me shit together, I was thinking about when I was using drugs and kind of when I ended up in recovery and kind of where we're at now. And there's been so many different kinds of like agenda policies that existed across maybe the last 20 or 30 years, like in the 80s and 90s, like the UK was like the world leader around harm reduction. Do you know what I mean? Like we invented the term harm reduction, like in Liverpool, and there was some really wonderful stuff there. And then I started to think about kind of like when I was in rehab, I was visited by this guy called Keith Halliwell, who he was the fucking the drug czar. Then I'm sure it was the Labour government kind of came up with this idea that they needed a drug czar, and he was it. And I had this man come into my room in Sunderland in Doxford Park in the rehab, and I was starstruck by this guy in a suit and all that. He was going, "You're doing really well," and all that. And I was like, "Oh, he's a politician." He wasn't a politician, but he was just appointed the drug czar. And then we ended up kind of like getting in this place of like, what was it? Tackling drugs to build a better Britain. That became the next drugs policy. Do you know what I mean? And it was all wrapped up with like the DTTO, the drug treatment and testing order, where let's start getting people pissing in fucking pots all the time, and they've got to turn up and do. And it was enforced sobriety in some ways. Do you know what I mean? Like kind of. So we had a bit of that going on. Then like kind of we got into like 2010, and then that was the introduction of the BRIC, wasn't it? It was the Building Recovery and Communities agenda, right? And kind of overnight, everyone went from being harm reduction workers to fucking recovery workers. Do you know, quick name badge change, everyone recovery worker, recovery specialist, and whatever else. And if you look at the deaths, right, in 2010, the deaths started going whoosh, sky high. Right? Because there's an argument to suggest that idea about kind of recovery and abstinence became a barrier for people who were maybe coming for a harm reduction type approaches to stop coming. Do you know what I mean? They stopped coming to our services because the idea of stopping drugs was too much for them, and the impact of that was more and more and more and more deaths. And where we live, Simpa, the northeast of England, we've got the highest rate of drug-related deaths. Again, this year, the northeast of England's had the highest rate of drug-related deaths consecutively for fucking 9 years, man. Do you know what I mean? Like, what did Einstein say? A definition of insanity is to repeat the same behaviour and expect different results. Hello, here we fucking go. So then we've had this, like, so then we had the Building Recovery and Communities agenda, which interestingly, it should be called Building Recovery in Brick Buildings, right? Because communities for me are fucking out there. Where I've been today on the fucking streets, that's where we need to build recoveries, is on the streets where people who use drugs are. However, interestingly, we build recoveries in brick buildings, right? There's no such thing as fucking hidden populations. I find them every time I land in a new place. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to Lewisham on Sunday. I'll be talking to drug users on Sunday fucking night because they're not hidden, because I'll go and find them. But we have this expectation that people have to come to us for drug treatment. There's hoops that they have to fucking jump through. And I think it's kind of got to a place now where we have this new fucking belter, which is from harm to fucking hope. And you just go, yeah, man, it's all a fucking nonsense. It's all just words on paper and a desperate attempt at trying to get people to stop taking drugs. Surely the answer has to be, hang on, we've been doing this for 50 years. It's not getting any better. The drugs industry is worth $350 to $400 billion a fucking year. Do you know what I mean? Like, what we're doing is not working. More people are fucking dying. More drugs are coming in. They're more stronger than they've ever become before. More people are using them. More people are fucking dying. So surely the answer isn't more of what we've done. When a minister's going to have the foresight to go, hang on, we've got to do something different here, and not be worried about what the constituents say? Because I think public opinion's changing. Wasn't there a YouGov poll or something done recently where it kind of was asking about the question of cannabis or something, and it was like 50% of people were supportive of kind of decriminalisation or the legalisation of cannabis. I think public opinion's changed, man.
Yeah, if you then add in as well prescribing of medicinal access, then it's the vast majority. Interesting, I was looking up some statistics and a few things that I just kind of wanted to bring up as we were talking, and I came across a report from a charity called The Mix, that are UK based, and they're claiming through their observations, they're stating a 75% increase in young people, 16 to 25-year-olds, consuming drugs in the past year, with 1 out of 5, claiming now that they're using it entirely to escape from the pain of their daily lives. They also claim that 1 in 3 young people have at all tried drugs in the past 12 months. So those increases, one of the things that, especially I think I quite often joke about with the older heads of people that are like, well, I've been in this position for 20, 30 years. And I was like, well, yeah, back when you got this, we had tape Walkmans. The iPod has been came and gone already. Like, gee, get on board. These kids, when they're at 14, 13, God, I've seen children, and I complained about it the other day on the podcast, seen a child with an iPad in a supermarket, but they've got access to this stuff and you can't watch them. As soon as you've got, I'm going to look at the door. They're on TikTok, and it's got all of the other people educating about everything. They know more about drugs than you will ever know by the time they're 14. So they're going, yeah, you're a liar. We know you're a liar. We know that's bullshit. They're watching places like America and Canada, especially with cannabis, and going, there's a whole culture and scene, and there's hope and future, and I can earn money in that, and I'm interested in that. There's music that I like in that. I want to take photos. They see hope and optimism, and they're looking across the water, and they're sat in this country and going, well, you actually get locked the fuck up for it. And so it's creating this juxtaposition where the youth now are just, I don't want to sound like one of these older, like, oh, the youth are out of control. But I think they're justifiably rejecting not just drug policy, but a lot of governmental policy, because they're far more fucking informed. Yeah. They can't have the wool pulled over their eyes. They were aware, the feeling you're coming from behind, and they're not going to let you do it.
But I think also, Simpa, I think that like, I agree with you there, what you're saying about young people. I think there was like something, I think one of the statistics is that like 3.2 million people used an illegal drug last year, right? It's kind of, I think that's 1 in every 11 people, which is about 9% of the UK population, used an illegal drug last year. When people hear those stats, they kind of get it's quite startling, isn't it? That kind of like 1 in every 11 people. It's great when I'm teaching cops as well, by the way, and I fucking give them that stat, and I'm in a room full of 100 cops. I go, so on the law of fucking averages, 1 of you fuckers, or a few of you, do you know what I mean? If we see some people looking at the floor, give them a right hard time. But I think the thing for me as well is that I think people are taking active steps to, you know, this idea of kind of the old Just Say No campaign, Grange Hill with fucking Danny Kendall and Zamo. Do you know what I mean? I went and fucking found an image for the other day. I posted something on Twitter where they've got Zamo like lying with a pin lying on the floor and all that, and it was uproar, and then they had the Just Say No campaigns. But you know what's like really refreshing for me though is like, there's this undertone which is happening, right? So like I go into lots of schools and deliver drugs education to young people, right? And like at one point, like, can you imagine at one time, you know, maybe like 15 years ago, the idea of going in and to schools and talking to young people about how to do drugs safely, right, would never have happened. But yet all of the schools that I'm going into, right, that's the fucking message the message actually is the safest way to take drugs is not to take them. However, I'm not going to fucking stand here and say to you, if you use drugs, you're going to die, because there's people in this group now, there's 100 of yous who are using Class A drugs who aren't dying. So if I tell you you're taking drugs, you're going to die, you're going to think I'm full of shit and I've got an agenda. So I'm not going to tell you. Like, I'm going to tell you not to take them, but I'm also going to talk about harm reduction. And you know, the great thing is, like the schools are enabling these talks to happen. They're enabling me and others. Like, I do an amazing session. Like, I've got a wing woman. We're like the fucking Phil and Holly of drugs education. A lass called Izzy Soley. Like, she's a lass that I worked with many years. I worked with her mum actually 10 or 15 years ago, 10 years ago maybe. I supported her mum because of Izzy's issues around substances. Do you know what I mean? And kind of then through working with her mum, I got to meet Izzy. And we've got a great friendship, man. She's an absolutely inspiring young woman. You know, her drug of choice was, and she won't mind me sharing this, her drug of choice was alcohol. And fucking hell, it makes my story look like, do you know, like she suffered real harms through her alcohol use. But we go in together and talk to young people around alcohol harms, kind of, and how to stay safe. And it's lush, man, you know, like we might go in and talk to, I was in St. Anthony's in Sunderland, private school there. Interesting, my mum went there as a little girl, so it was weird actually to kind of be in some of the old grounds where my mum was when she was alive and stuff. And you'll end up with like 100 kids in it, and you'll do your thing, and like they get the whole shock and all, they get the potty mouth Geordie and all that, and they're laughing and they're all over. But it also gets a bit serious, you know. Like when what kids have to recognise is, I'm not saying that everyone who takes drugs is going to end up where I did, because that's not the case. Do you know what I mean? Like the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime say around 75% of people who use drugs globally do so without any huge harms that happen to them. Then there's around 10 or 15% of the global population who end up where I did. It's right and proper for me to say that there's a proportion of people who are going to use drugs and they're going to be okay, and also there's a proportion of people that end up like me. So the chances are you have to be really careful in what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? So that you have a bit of a hard and tough session with me, but what happens is you end up with like 80 of them or 90 of them kids will all fuck off back to class, and then there's 10 kids who are still walking around the edges of the hall looking at posters and that, and you just know these are the kids that want to come and talk to you about their drug use. And last time me and Izzy were there, we had 4 young girls, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, who come over and said, we really enjoy that. I said, well, thanks very much, girls. How's it going? They went, well, we take some pills and stuff like that. And I go, thanks for your fucking honesty, man. Do you know what I mean? Like, what's the crack? Tell us about what's the crack, what you're getting, what you're taking, what's it like, you enjoy. And we end up having a conversation there where these young girls, for the first time ever, are having a conversation with an adult about their drug use. And the response they're getting when they tell me they're taking drugs is, thank you for being honest. Not, I'm going to tell you, ma'am, let's get the fucking police. The schools are embracing that. And I think that this is the undertone. God, I tell you, it takes me fucking forever to get back to my point today. This is the undertone where what things are changing from the bottom up. And I think that if we do it right, politicians being fickle, right? They're going to come down and grab hold of some of that stuff. I think we're in a really strong place right now, Simpa, where I've been doing this work now and around this stuff for 20 odd years. Do you know what I mean? And I think we're in a much better place than we are now, where I think we're getting hurt.
Yeah, entirely. And I think even just with what I was rattling off with those statistics before, that if then the youth are exposed to drugs and through people like yourself giving them the education to then be responsible and go, oh, I enjoyed that pill. Oh, the mystique is kind of gone. It's not taboo anymore. Oh, yeah, I'll focus on my studies. Yeah, I'll do the other thing. It's not that act of rebellion. It's not a tool that can be, I'm going to piss off my parents with it sort of thing. It's just like, oh damn, I'll go. Do you know what I mean? So it neutralizes those rogue elements, and it then leaves kind of the core of people that are predisposed almost to the problematic. And then the next sort of thing could be interventions. Well, how is home? You're saying that you're taking these drugs, but you're not enjoying them. That's a big red flag sort of thing. And this is a conversation that I have sort of with anybody and everybody. I mean, I used to obviously take a lot of drugs, was known for taking a lot of drugs, and found often sobriety a very difficult mindset to be in. Mm. But then as I started to be more choosy and picky with different substances and actually go, if I don't mix those three things, I don't have this horrible hangover feeling for 2 days. And start to understand and then and self-educate myself on them. And then once I was aware what was happening, I could still take the same amount of drugs, but I could function far fucking better because I go, that first thing in the morning, then eat, then do this, then that. And it's real basic shit, but most people are left to their own devices. And as we've sort of intimated before with technology, and then with people like yourself, again, seeing I'll return the compliment, a handsome, elderly, not elderly gentleman up on stage.
I'm only 50, just because you
I was trying, the thing in my brain was saying, don't say elderly. So the only word that came out.
I'll have it, it's fine.
No. But again, like you said, that humanizing element, I think, is beyond powerful, because if I remember just even people like, oh, we're going out, you take 2 pills, and I'm like, I'm 5 deep. People, what the fuck? And it wouldn't even be that I needed the 5 pills. It'd be almost, I want the shock value of, I've taken the extra one. What's the extra one going to do?
But Simba, you're dead right there. I got into lots and lots of trouble with the drugs that I was taking because I didn't know how to do them. I wasn't being, because like you, do you know what I mean? Like you, I was necking loads and loads of E's, and a lot of that was wanting to be seen as the fucking pill monster, because part of that was about, like, there was a part of me that needed acceptance and validation and positive regard. Like I was fucking, do you know what I mean? And kind of, I was trying to find that kind of like my place in the world, my social acceptance. I didn't feel good about myself, didn't believe in myself. I had low self-esteem, I had low self-worth, kind of like getting a bit of a reputation for being the beer monster or the joker or the guy who necks loads of pills. I used to get like emotional strokes from people. I used to get validation and connection. But also what I got was I ended up like in positions where I was taking shitloads of benzos and drinking liters of white cider, and ending up with like 2 central nervous system depressants and kind of using opiates on top of that, and kind of like dihydrocodeine, taking 50 of them to try and come down off amphetamines, and then wondering why people are using naloxone to save me fucking life. Couldn't understand then why I was like rattling, because I was addicted to opiates. I wasn't a fucking heroin user. What are you talking about? I'm not a heroin user. Well, you are a heroin user because you're taking fucking huge quantities of dihydrocodeine, which are laced with opiates, And I think like the messaging, it was always about just saying no. And I do think now we've got so many different outlets, like you're saying, where people can get information, advice, and guidance, where it's not a bunch of fuckwits just making stuff up. You've got Way of the Loop, you've got Wedanos, you've got kind of lots of wonderful you've got reagent tests, Sky Jones, do you know what I mean? You can get tests and stuff for people's drugs. The reality is people don't typically want to die. People don't want to be taking imposter drugs and the wrong kinds of drugs, do you know what I mean? And I think that we've got a movement now where it's about kind of trying to be sensible about our drug use, looking after each other as a community. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's a really healthy place for us to be. I'm hoping that we get to a place where, and we're a long way off, man, but where the government can kind of see the importance of that. But it's reassuring to start hearing harm reduction being spoken about a lot more. There's a lot more job roles which are now becoming available in drug treatment. The narrative's changing. It's not that recovery is dead in the water. Recovery is part of a continuum of harm reduction, but it's not now kind of being held up as this is what success looks like. The public health outcome framework isn't purely written around recovery, and success is you getting abstinent, leaving treatment, and not kind of returning with a drug use for a period of 12 weeks. There's an acceptance now that harm reduction's definitely got its place, and I think it's coming back, which is mint.
Yeah, because I mean, as you said, either of them are still only hitting a certain group of the population, whereas the combination of the two, and it's I suppose, do you know Dana Larson out of Canada? He does a service called WeTestYourDrugs.ca or whatever it is, and they've done 10, 12,000 plus samples. Brilliant guy. And we were talking about a term that is a long way off, but I'm trying to get into the conversation to be the next step of benefit maximization.
Right. What does that mean?
So we're talking about harm reduction is one side of it, and then benefit maximization. So we're talking about when taking the substance. So yes, harm reduction is, say, negative to neutral.
Yeah.
Okay, I know how to not use it badly. How can I make it better? So say learning about lemon tech with mushrooms. Take less mushrooms by mixing your mushrooms first in lemon juice, soak them for 15 to 20 minutes. You're creating a chemical reaction from psilocybin to psilocin,
But wait a minute. Right,
And this means that it increases the potency. So then you take less of it, which means you get a stronger, shorter burst high. You then sort of come out of it quicker. Same as we know with like decarboxylating with cannabis, for example, around edibles, so then you consume less. All those kind of things, they can't come under the first two remit. And obviously we can't, that's promoting drug use, as it were, under their current guise. But I think there needs to be eventually that kind of space for, if you then are going to do it, obviously you can't say this maybe at school kids. I don't think, all right, kids, so now you've chosen to do drugs. What we're going to do is, but it's that.
Do you know what, Simba? You know, I think honestly, like for me, in certain schools, I'm saying if you choose to use MDMA, start with a quarter and drink water. Like we're talking about the fact that you can always put more in, but you can't take more out. So it's not that we're advocating fucking drug use. And you know what? Some people might go, I don't get complaints. At the end of the day, I don't get complaints from the schools, don't get complaints about parents. But if parents want to complain to me and they're saying, you're telling my kid how to use drugs, I'm going to go, no, I'm fucking not. But trust me, you'd rather have your kid informed about drug use and how to do it rather than them being fucking dead, which is the reality. Do you know what I mean? Like, because that's the reality. But I like what you said there, Simba. Look, I'm not the guy who kind of talks all about, that's what happened to me, so that's what happens to everyone. You know what? When I was in the Senate, I'm talking in front of ministers that there's good effects from taking drugs, that taking certain kinds of drugs feel fucking lovely. Do you know what I mean? We have to act like, I wasn't taking drugs because they weren't nice. I was taking drugs because they were nice. But we can't be like, we've got to be doing that from a balanced place as well. Like, I can't be like a complete angry fuckwit going, right, all drugs are fucking awesome. That's where it's about, like, we have to make sure that the people who are making these arguments are the right faces, are the right people, do you know what I mean? Where they can be seen like, I'm just an open book, man. I'm having conversations around fucking drug use in the co-op at 6:30 a.m. while I'm buying a loaf of fucking bread with a woman on the checkout. And I'm talking about being an ex-drug user. I'm talking about the positive impacts that I had, talking about the fact that, like, alcohol can be kind of like the biggest problem that I fucking have from time to time, you know, because I get to a place where, in terms of its psychoactively, I can end up fucking out me fucking head. And in the places I've ended up in, the police cells have always been as a result of bloody taking loads and loads of drink and being in conscious blackouts, you know, like irresponsibly using alcohol, man. So I don't know, man. I think it's about having those healthy conversations. But also the thing for me, like, obviously, which I'm really passionate about doing is creating opportunities for people who use drugs to be seen in a really positive light, doing great things. And, you know, like the peer-to-peer naloxone projects have been going really well across the UK. I think when I do Lewisham and Redbridge next week, that'll be number 30. That'll be the 30th project in 3 years across across England and Scotland. That's like fucking, what's that? It's like 10 a year, isn't it? Which is absolutely unbelievable, really amazing. Really showcases people who've been written off by society, who's been deemed as got nothing to fucking give, a drain on society, just criminals, not good for anything, hide them away, lock away the key and all that. And, you know, kind of see these people out in the community, right, like using their lived and living experience from positions of good, right, talking to members of the public. Today, right, we're in Salford today, underneath the Salford Centre. And I was with 5 peers today, all of them who had issues around kind of drug use and stuff like that, sitting with members of the public. There was 2 guys, there was Gary and there was Paula. They were both talking to 2 Sikh blokes, right, who got the most beautiful kind of shop. It's full of like iPhone repairs. It was just lovely and clean inside. And they were in there for half an hour doing a 5-minute naloxone demonstration, right? And both of the guys took naloxone kits, but they engaged in a conversation 25 minutes longer than the training, which was about like Gary and Paula talking about their lived experience, where they'd been, the reasons why they were the way they were, and the humanity and the connection between them, all 4 of them, was amazing. And this is happening all the time, you know, like this is why these projects are so beautiful, because it allows the taboo of drug users to meet with the general public. And then what you find is that the general public go, God, these people aren't fucking idiots. Then I've still got my handbag. Do you know what I mean? I've been really well informed there. And I kind of feel like I want to do something in the event that somebody from our community has an overdose. Do you know what I mean? And I think, like, for me, the peer-to-peer naloxone thing's just been the start of it. So it kind of got us thinking about, like, what's next? So what we did in Wales is I went to Newport 18 months ago. GDAS, Gwen Drug and Alcohol Services, Rondine Molinaro, give us a bell. She said, can we have a naloxone program? The first one in Wales. I said, let's give it a go. So I went down to Newport. I met with Mick, Kimberly and Leighton, 3 peers down there. We trained those guys up and they became the Wales's first naloxone peers, right? We had a count up of numbers recently. Those 3 peers did over 1,700 naloxone supplies in 18 months, right? That's what they've done, the 3 of them, right? They've been responsible for handing out those kits. Every one of those kits has the opportunity to reverse an overdose so it becomes non-fatal. So then we ended up doing, I went from Newport, I went to, where did I go? Merthyr Tydfil, right? Never thought I'd fucking end up in Merthyr Tydfil in my life, right? What a great name, right? With an organisation called Barrod. They called that group Merthyr Mad, Merthyr Against Drug Death. So we mobilised their group. Then I went to Swansea Safe, which is Swansea Against Fatal Episodes. All these names the peers come up with themselves, you know what I mean? Then we went to Cardiff. It was Cardiff High, which is Help is Given Hope. Went from there to Wrexham. What do they call them? The Wrexham Rescuers United. Them peers, right? Fucking hell, man. They were mob-handed, man. Honestly, there was about fucking 7 of them, 8 of them, all in hoodies and t-shirts. They'd done like 65 naloxone supplies in one day, right? They were all on the streets like fucking energized, man. Like, where was the last one? Went to Powys. That group called themselves Power Surge. And then Dyfed. I was in Dyfed in Wales about 3 weeks ago, and Dyfed became the 7th area planning board. The 7 area planning boards in Wales, right? They became the 7th area planning board to have adopted peer-led approaches, all supported by the Welsh Government, right? So arguably, Wales became the first country in the whole of the UK to have people who use drugs, not just people who've had lived experience, active drug users volunteering with organisations being paid to go out into the community and make supplies of fucking naloxone, right? And it was like, we've got grown men, right, and women. We shouldn't just say grown men. This is the thing, we've got grown men. It's kind of like that. When you say that, it's kind of, that's how important it is, because if a grown man cries, then but have like guys like Wayne with a big fucking tattoo on his face, like, God, mate, I feel fucking alive. It's like a free fucking high. And you know what, man, like that's a common thing that these people say, that like these people, I don't mean that in a negative sense, people who use drugs say, you know, it's like a free high. Now that speaks volumes to me, because what that says is they're getting something from doing this behavior out in the community where they feel worthy, they feel self-worth, they're getting recognition and love that makes them feel the same way as sniffing a bit of fucking coke or using a bit of fucking heroin. Do you know what I mean? And like, say, man, I get fucking goosebumps, man. I'm covered in goosebumps right now thinking about this daft little project that we send them out in a £33 fucking hoodie and t-shirt with a little lanyard around their neck that says naloxone volunteer, and they feel like fucking kings and queens, and they get acceptance and love from the community, and they're able to tell stories of pain, stories of fucking hurt for this client group. And what that does instantly is changes people's fucking views like that. So it's the beautiful project. So what we're now doing is saying, well, we've done that, let's push the boundaries. So now we're working on peer-led enhanced harm reduction. We've set ourselves another challenge in Wales, which is dry blood spot testing. So we're going to train all of the 7 peer groups up to be able to go out into the community, test people for hepatitis C, then refer them in for treatment and support with a new treatment that's available. We're doing secondary needle and syringe programs. So not only do they have naloxone in their bags, now they can do a fucking hepatitis C test, and we can give you some clean works and some injecting equipment. We're doing sexual health and condom supplies, so kind of making sure that kind of at the risk of bloodborne viruses, safe sex and all that, we're giving away that stuff. We're doing drugs litter projects as well, so kind of cleaning up the streets if we come across any like discarded works or anything like that around. You know what, man, that just sings a fucking real beauty, and it's like an honor to be doing this shit, man. Love it. Meaning and purpose for people who use drugs. Definitely mint.
Yeah. It's, if the word wasn't so cheapened by it being placed within the title of the most recent Tory drug strategy, it is quintessentially hope. And it's something I found in speaking for the first time publicly about my experience, is that everything I had spent a lifetime hiding, everything I had spent a lifetime ashamed of, everything that I thought was my life being wasted, lost, ruined, was just the research, the on-the-ground understanding of these things, and to then have that become, I'm getting goosebumpy, even a bit from teary, because again, it's powerful. You're saving lives by what you're doing with naloxone and everything else, but you're giving people the opportunity to recognize that their life isn't over and that they haven't fucked it. They're not ruined, they're not scarred, they're not marred. They have every opportunity to, I was going to say, reach for the stars, but I've been so cliche, but they have that power, and to give people that, I imagine is as you say, it's a high in and of itself, you know what I mean?
Yeah, man, and you know that as well, though, but this goes back to the point that I was saying earlier about being in privileged positions, right? How, like, we all play different parts. You play a part, I play my part, others play their parts, right? Like, for me, like, being in environments with the likes of like Kate Hall and Jonathan Miller, who are kind of both kind of like right up the food chain in Greater Manchester NHS Foundation Trust, you know, they come to me and they go like, we've seen some of the projects that you do, would really love to do it in this big machine that is the trust, right? And I go, that's absolutely awesome that you want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with people who are active drug users, right? Now, straight away for them, they were on board with that. Right. But for some organizations, right, that's kind of like the technical support element that I do with the projects, which is about making the service ready to receive the project, to receive the peers. Some other areas that I've worked with when I've said that, like, we're going to have people who actively use drugs working as volunteers, to go, don't think you can do that. And I go, really? Like, why don't you think that you can have people who are actively using drugs involved with doing the project, you know? Because of that whole unconscious bias, you know, like, we don't have people necessarily calling out in the way in which I do, you know? I'm not calling people out in a horrible way, but what I do say is, like, oh, it's interesting that you're saying you can't have people who use drugs volunteer and within your organization when you've got your staff drinking ethanol on a weekend, getting pissed, but they're on the fucking payroll. Like, is that not discriminatory that people can use a psychoactive drug called alcohol and be on the payroll, but somebody who's maybe using cannabis or snorting a bit of cocaine can't? Do you know what I mean? And I think the thing for me, it's about like that's the privileged position that I'm in, is to help organizations now to be able to kind of see the value in working with this disenfranchised group who typically have been written off. Nobody sees the good in what they've got. But like you alluded to earlier, we've served we've got street degrees, man. Do you know what I mean? We've served our fucking time for a decade of fucking pain, and we've got a qualification that nobody wants. Do you know what I mean? And I think all credit, right, to all of the drug treatment providers that I work with, right? And you know what? And this isn't about fucking, oh, he's just trying to feather his own cap, you know? Like, it's not about that, right? I'll call organizations out if I have to. They're really trying their best, right, to kind of engage, involve, participate, and co-produce with people with lived and living experience of addictions. And there's real excitement which is coming from that. So for me, it's about, so what's next, and how do we push the parameters, and kind of how do we normalize some of this stuff and accept the fact that, you know, people are going to take drugs, man, and that's a human right to be able to do so. And what gives us the right to kind of be dictating what people can and can't do. And I hope in time that with all of that kind of excitement that comes along from these projects, that does filter up, and that kind of those governmental agencies, the Suella Bravermans, I think she's gone now as well, hasn't she? Do you know what I mean? In the pretty south of the world. Aye. But I think kind of like we start to get really progressive with the likes of Wales. You know, Wales are really progressive as far as I can see. Mark Drakeford and others, you know, that kind of they're right on the money. We're trying to bring about changes, but still we've got a long way to go. Drug consumption rooms, kind of regulated drug markets, kind of, you know, heroin assisted treatment. All of these things are evidence based. There's a global evidence base around these things, and that's what we need to be attaching ourselves to. Yes, world class treatment and support. However, creating opportunities where those 17 people don't die every day. You know, I think that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, it's somewhere in my notes. Yeah, 6.2% increase from 2020 and 2021's deaths, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and state that it's probably going to be higher when the figures for this year come out. And it's frustrating that we're starting to see these things, but it's almost I feel we're missing something. The Desmond Tutu quote of the villagers pulling the men out of the river every day. And, you know, eventually you've got to go upriver and find out why the fuck they're falling in. And I think that Wales is interesting. Scotland as well. Obviously, Scotland's a bit more restrained through its devolution powers because obviously they've got a fuckload of energy that England really needs for them to not fuck off with. But because they've been depressed economically and through various kind of Tory government's idea of England first, we see that social deprivation, economic deprivation, plus then propensity of generational trauma. So then if you like fire a father from working in the mines, you then take money out of the raising in the household. You end up with educational insecurity, housing insecurity. You can then end up with relationship breaking down, divorce, other traumas, and shouting. Alcoholism and addiction is a way to deal. And you see how all of these things manifest. So is there, and obviously the police are not necessarily the right people, but now you're starting to work with NHS trusts. Can they start to understand that if they then partnered this as well with not forceful, not the kind of way we've done with recovery of forced sobriety, of going, yeah, you can have all the treatment you want when you don't do the drugs, but a kind of like just the classic talking therapy, CBT, as a basic, just so people can identify behavior cycles. Because that was one of the things that it took me a long time, is once I sobered up enough from certain drugs and I learned about that drug, next time I went to take that drug, it was a conscious thing.
Yeah.
And I'd then go, actually, it's been a while, tolerance has dropped, and all of these different things started running through my brain. And then it was like, why am I taking this? And once I became conscious of it and going, I wanted that because I'm feeling hurt right now. What's the consequence of me eating 4 valleys? I'm going to lose the rest of my day. I'm going to be groggy tomorrow, probably a bit aggressive and short-tempered with people. I'm going to write off, etc. You start to make those smarter decisions. And then once I really could identify, right, there's a loneliness element. There's something here from childhood, or there's this, or there's what. Once you can be conscious of it, you can at least delay that need to pacify it. And each time it's like strengthening a muscle till eventually there were certain drugs that I just went, I don't need that one anymore. And I've kind of come back to them and the opportunities, and I've gone like, no, the consequence of that outweighs the benefit for me right now. Thank you, though. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, but I think, and I think you're right. Simba, I think that like one of the ironies is, you know what, right? So it's like, it's not all about bashing the government as well. Kind of like within the harm to hope. There's some good stuff. Like the idea of Project Ada. Kind of like I'm doing some work currently in Liverpool with We Are With You, which is a kind of a project partly funded by Project Ada. Like, There's some really great financial investment going in there. A lot of the stuff we're doing around the peer-to-peer stuff's being built out of kind of the funding that ADA allows. We've got like, kind of drug diversion schemes now, which kind of started their life in Durham. Do you know what I mean? With Ron Hogg and Mike Barton and stuff, like out of court disposals, the idea that we're not going to criminalise you if we catch you with a Class A drug, but what we are going to do is divert you into a drug and alcohol treatment and support service, not for treatment, but so we can kind of talk you about your drug use, and kind of make you aware of some of the harms. And that for me is hope, man. That's completely hopeful. But then it's that rhetoric that then gets rammed up, but if we catch you the next time, then we may take your driving license. Then the next time we may take your passport. But like, it's not then thinking about like the negative consequences that come from that for a family man who's like, maybe he's like being like got his own business, he loses his van, he loses his livelihood, his family are in a lot more hurt and harm. And that's when you get into those people going, well, he had a choice and all that. And you kind of just go, nah, man, there's got to be a more thought out way of doing things. Do you know what I mean? But we're never going to get there overnight. But I do think that the starting point has to be looking at like, what's the baseline from which we're making decisions around drugs and drug harms? Do you know what I mean? And that for me then goes back to the Misuse of Drugs Act, and for me, we have to acknowledge like the Advisory Council on Misuse of Drugs. Like, again, we've all got our parts to play, you know what I mean? Mate, I'm a bit of a gobshite, but I'm a lot of a fucking gobshite. I've got more patter than a fortnight's rain, and I use it well, and I influence well with it, right? But I can't be the person who's kind of influencing about kind of pharmacology of different kinds of drugs and those harms. But the great thing is we've got wonderful scientists like David Nutt. We've got kind of like Professor Alex Stevens. We've got kind of like Fiona Meashams of the world. We've got all of the people who sit on the Advisory Council of the Misuse of Drugs. We've got these global experts who are in a position to be able to look at the drug strategy and not tear it up. Again, it's like, maybe it's a Disney torn up, but that's kind of quite a flippant aggressive statement, let's have a look at it. let's kind of reestablish like the different kinds of drugs that are being used and the drug harms. Do you know what I mean? And maybe that's the starting point for a way in which we start to think about drugs differently. And think about the consequences for people who use those certain kinds of drugs, you know? Like for me, I honestly don't feel that people should be criminalized for using any drug. I don't think anyone should be criminalized in any way for what they put into their bodies. I think that currently in the current climate where organized crime gangs have the monopoly on kind of the drugs markets, I think there should be consequences for people who get caught selling drugs. You know, it can't just be like it can't be a free for all. Do you know what I mean? But I think one of the ways in which we kind of take the control of organized, take the control away from organized crime gangs is through like legalization, decriminalization, and the regulation of all drugs. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and you made a point before we started recording about like the madness of like prescription based cannabis, for instance, versus like plants that aren't prescription based. And I was doing this I do this kind of this presentation for like for cops and stuff like that. I was with the Association of Police Drug Expert Witnesses about 4 weeks ago in Stratford-upon-Avon, and then a presentation I did before that was for the National Police Chiefs Council. And that was in the same place, ironically. It must be the place where all the cops go, is Stratford-upon-Avon. Mm-hmm. And one of my slides has a picture. It has 3 pictures. The first picture is of Peter Crichton's drug consumption van on the left. Before he got his ambulance, it was his first van. And then the picture in the middle is of 2 cannabis plants, which are on the ground, but on the pavement in the back, there's a bumper sticker of a police car. Do you know what I mean? So obviously the police have stuck it there and took a photograph of it. And then the picture on the right is of fucking like a massive, massive cannabis grow, right? And I kind of typically use this to talk about the madness of the war on drugs, you know? So kind of like here you have Peter Crichton, who's a man who's so fed up with the people he cares about dying in Scotland that he takes the law into his own hands to try and stop people from dying and creating a safe space for them to be able to use drugs, and eventually gets arrested for that. Do you know what I mean, right? So he gets arrested for trying to fucking preserve people's lives, right? So then we've also got this picture of fucking these 2 plants, which invariably, if the police have took a photograph of them in the police car there, they're kind of proud of that. I wonder, did those 2 people those people who that 2 plants belong to, did they also get criminalized? Do you know what I mean? Or did they kind of go through the trauma of maybe having the police put their fucking door in? Do you know what I mean? Or did they get an out-of-court disposal? But either way, that couldn't have been a nice experience for them. But then that picture on the right, which is of this massive fucking cannabis grow, I always ask the question, where the fuck's this cannabis grow? And people start going, Switzerland, Sweden. You go, no, it's like, it's in Kent. And it's owned by GM Pharmaceuticals, this grow. And it's like, there's 90 tons of it a year go out from the UK to the rest of the world, because kind of, I might be wrong in this next statement. And if I am, please correct us, because I'll alter myself when I say it, Simpa, but like the UK being the biggest exporter, is it, to the rest of the world of medical cannabis? I don't know. But it may
No, you're correct. I think clarify. I think it's you mean GW Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. All right. Aye. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, you are more than correct. I think it's well over 100 tons now, and these are still estimates by the United Nations, because the UK won't reveal it because they don't have to, because it's technically a private corporation now owned by an Irish corporation, so it's got even less insight and oversight from UK government.
So then the argument that I'm making to all these audiences full of cops, I'm going, so fucking why aren't you putting the fucking doors into that fucking place? I'll tell you where it is. Why are you wanting to go and fucking bend somebody up for 2 fucking plants, but yet 90 tons of the stuff's coming out of fucking there? What's the difference between those plants in there and those plants there? And you kind of see like, people sitting with their heads in their hands because they see the madness of it. You know what I mean, Simba? And I think, and I hope we don't get any fucking libel laws or anything here, but interestingly, I'm sure one of the directors of, what was the name of that company?
GW
Pharmaceuticals. I'm sure that one of their directors, his wife is called Victoria Aitkins. And Victoria Aitkins was the drugs minister, conservative drugs minister.
I'll clarify this one because it is something that people end up sort of misrepeating. It worked out, Victoria Aitkins, who one of her roles was as minister when she was in, was it Theresa May's government? No, David Cameron's government. One of I think it was Cameron's government. But basically, her husband is Paul Kenwood, who is the managing director of a company called British Sugar. British Sugar have a subcontract to grow 45 acres of cannabis for GW Pharmaceuticals. But then also, I know it was during Theresa May's government, because Theresa May's husband at the time is Philip May, and he was the head of client relations and a director of an investment firm who happened to at the time own the majority share in GW Pharmaceuticals. So it just again creates that wonderful little conspiracy, and obviously they've backed away from it and whatever else. But now you look at it, you've got people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and others that are investing millions through their portfolio into cannabis while saying we need to lock them up and make it a Class A.
Yeah, and I think the thing for me though, Simba, look, it's not that fucking people shouldn't be making money out of like this commodity. It's not about that, man. But it's about like let's not pursue the fucking little man. Let's not hurt the Peter Craigens of the world for trying to do the fucking right thing. Let's not ruin these two people for fucking a few plants, for trying to probably have a little smoke in the fucking house and not hurt anybody. Do you know what I mean? When you've got big national corporations who are kind of doing things like this with affiliations with kind of prominent ministers, however long the distance is, there seems to me to be a fucking bit of a conflict of interest there. Do you know what I mean? And it's all just a little bit. It's all just a little bit messy. But interestingly, when I was in that presentation, after I'd done the presentation, I sat back down. The guy I was with, he was smirking, and I said, "What's up?" He said, "One of the directors from the pharma company you've just been talking about in the audience, and he's asked if you wouldn't name where that site is in future." I was like, "Fucking hell, it's bizarre, isn't it?" Do you know what I mean? Like, but anyway, to kind of get back, listen. My feeling around kind of policing and stuff like that, I think it's quite ironic that I believe that police are one of the main drivers of sensible drug policy reforms currently and around harm reduction. Yes, they're definitely still locking people up, but definitely in terms of kind of like you look at West Midlands police and kind of other police forces, they're being really proactive now in terms of like thinking about different ways of being able to do things. You mentioned earlier, who was it? The new...
Mark Rowley, the new head of the Met Police.
Yeah, he came out recently publicly saying that we needed to do things differently. You've got Chief Constable Richard Lewis, who's the new drugs lead for the National Police Chiefs Council, publicly coming out and saying that we want to do things differently. I train a lot of cops up and down the UK. You know, they tell me they don't want to be going after the low-hanging fruit. It's not on their agenda. You know, there's bigger fish to fry, but their hands are tied as well. You know, so I think for me, like there is a positive appetite for change. I definitely think that it's coming, but we have to deal with. I have to deal with it. I choose to deal with it from a place of positivity and being optimistic and taking people on journeys and getting into people's hearts. You know, my wife said a long time ago to me, you know, like I was always pitching at the wrong level, that I needed to be kind of talking to ministers and stuff like that. And it wasn't an ego statement, do you know what I mean? And I'm in a place now where, thankfully, I'm getting the opportunity to kind of influence that just that little bit, that higher level, you know, and that's a really nice place to be, because it gives me the opportunity to talk about all the fucking amazing people that I get to work with every single day across Bury, Bolton, Salford, Trafford, Lewisham next week, and Redbridge and Lewisham in the same week, and then Wales and Liverpool and Wigan and all of these wonderful places that have got the people who I really care about, who are trying to do great things to save the lives of their friends. You know what I mean? And I think it's through those stories of love and compassion and showing videos. I video everything, photograph and video everything, showing ministers pictures of people where they're telling their stories, who've been through those traumas, but they're trying to better themselves. You know, I think we can do something really special with that, man.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think once you win the police, I mean, we're already seeing it. I think last I checked, it's still, I think it's 9 out of 43 constabularies in England and Wales that have implemented checkpoint diversions, which are these out-of-court sort of disposals. That's the word they use. Can never pull it out my ass, that one. But yeah, but it's good that we're now seeing obviously this increase. If we get the Met on board, basically that's the rest of the country. It then becomes very difficult for these smaller population centers, because we will very quickly statistically see how this works. And it's an interesting thing, as you say. I think it took me a long time. Obviously, I was a victim to sort of policing because I was kicked out of school a lot. I dealt with social services, had a very disruptive childhood. So cops would bring me back 2, 3 in the morning. They'd find me doing all sorts of stupid shit as a youth because I was troubled. I was a troubled young man. So I had resentment. I had hatred. It was these people were these uniformed fascists in my head that were picking me up and taking me back to a problematic area to face, trauma and abuse. And it's taken me a long time to recognize that actually majority of those cops were good to me. When they put me in the car, if I didn't have shoes on or whatever, if I was covered in blood or whatever it would be, they'd seek to help in some way, but they would never then go, we're taking you away. It wouldn't be forceful in that way. Obviously, the limitations in the law back then. And then, as I've come older and been a drug user, and even the interactions I've had, I've still never touched all the wood, not been arrested in drug possession. Yet I've been caught by cops half a dozen times with different drugs, but just talk to them and they kind of they just use their discretion and they're kind of going, well, clearly you're just a person that's got drugs on you right now. You're not a threat. You've got no history. You're not got a warrant. There's no nothing. I didn't have this interaction. Good night, sir.
Good night. Because on the most part, man, Simba, there can't be also that, there was a time when every cop I was teaching, I was younger than every cop I was teaching 20 years ago. Right now, I'm older than every cop I teach. Do you know what I mean? Like I train every cop at Lincolnshire Police, for instance. Every new cohort of police officers that they have a session with me to help them become like ACE aware and trauma informed, and kind of like I absolutely ask the question of them in terms of like. Put your hands up if you think that we should be criminalising people who use drugs, and the hands just don't go up, man. Put your hands up if you would carry naloxone, all the hands go up. But you know what I mean? I think we've got a newer generation of police officers coming through who aren't like some of the old guard who've been in this big institution for ages, who've been conditioned and kind of that pissed off. We've got an opportunity now with the next generation of police officers to tell them that like that Pelian principle that's around, that kind of the foundations of policing was built, like the preservation of life, and be proud to protect, kind of like we've all got a different role to play in kind of tackling these issues, and equally I feel like for me I also have to advocate for the police from time to time. It's not all about me bashing government, it's not all about me bashing certain groups of people, right? There's a collective responsibility on all of us to be accountable for change, so I have to. With people who use drugs, for instance, on each of those groups, Simpa, right? Each of the naloxone groups have set up and developed something called the Naloxone Champion Steering Group. So what we do is we invite the local public health commissioner to come and sit on that group with people who use drugs, and we invite an inspector from the local police area command to come and sit on those groups as well, so we can all forge and build relationships. Do you know what I mean, right? And it's really wonderful to see the way in which at first when you tell some of the drug users, right, I'm bringing a cop in, they go, you're fucking mad, we can't be having fucking cops in here. I go, yeah, man. Wind your fucking neck in, right? You're quick to judge, like you're quick about when they judge you, but you're now sat here judging them. Like let's give it a fair shot. And actually, what you get to see is active drug users building and forging relationships with police officers where they meet on a fucking really human level. And then that cop goes away and he goes right across his police area command. We've got an awesome group of people who are going out saving lives. If you see them with their bags and their backpacks and they're doing stuff with the drug users, give them a wide berth, and it becomes like this. It becomes a really wonderful co-production. And I do, honestly, I keep going back to it. For me, I kind of feel like more at the lower levels and the middle levels, right? We've got some really great work, some great voices and that coming together now. We've got some real champions. And I definitely think that's going to be a way of influencing higher up, because I do get the sense that there's only a matter of time where, and that's gone on for a long time, but I think public appetite's changing. I think that ministers are going to start to hear that. They're going to recognise that they're not going to lose votes if they maybe think about doing some reforms and all the rest of it. And I think we're going to get there. It's going to be slow, but it's progressing anyway. That's my sense of where we're at. Like, to be honest.
Yeah, no, exactly right, and I swing violently on this pendulum from some days, obviously, depending how angry I am, but depending, what I've learned that day, what news I've seen, what atrocity that I've witnessed, as it were, second, third hand, whatever. But my trajectory across the evolution of my life is to recognize and remind myself that when the war is over, there will still be police. And actually, the Pelian principles, as you spoke of before, the 9 principles set down by Sir Robert Peel, I fundamentally agree with. And it still takes me a long time to struggle with that because I've come from being an anarchist that was like, we'll burn everything to fucking ground. We just live in the ashes. It doesn't matter. Freedom is freedom is freedom. And it doesn't matter what it looks like. To now going, all right, I'm still not on board with this whole neoliberalistic capitalist system as it is, but all right, we can work within this so we can save the people. If we can take away that pit at the bottom that it's funneling people through, then yeah, that we can sort the top as we go, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the police, again, I think, as you were saying, that more and more they get into policing because they see the shit going around them and they know it's not the drugs. No. They can see it, so they have to go, all right, I need to get in this. And they go, well, and I still talk to a couple of cops that I did the police coaching course with in Durham, and they identified me to go and train with them on community matters because I basically stood up in a meeting with them, loads of councillors, housing and local NHS from my area, because they were like, there's drugs and suicide rampant in the area. And I basically stood up and went, these are backward. These are saying that they're taking drugs and killing themselves because they took the drugs. And I'm saying, no, they're socially deprived. They have nothing. Some of these people that I know around you are third, fourth generation unemployed. And they're being called benefit scum, scroungers. And saying, no, they've not been given any services, not necessarily a hand up, but just taking the boot off. Do you know what I mean? And so we're at a point, I think, that there are people craving in the police force to serve, protect, to work with that community. But they have to then, as well as, the police, but the drug users themselves, I'm still traumatized by it. I see a blue light, I've got a tub, a magic tub that sits in my car that says if I get pulled over in the car, I can have as much THC in my blood as I have. And so I have that little protection.
But I can't. That's the madness as well, isn't it? But I couldn't. If I got caught in the car with THC, I'm fucking drug swapped or whatever. Then the chances are I'm not driving around to hotels and that anymore. And it is all pretty crazy. But again, I do take hope, Simpa, from the fact that when I was in heaven and all that, there used to always be ACAB written on the walls and that graffiti, all coppers are bastards, you know what I mean? And it's like, honestly, I'll name me flagged on the mast. No, they're not, man. I think the cops who are absolute wankers, it's nothing to do with the fact that they're police officers, they're just wankers with a warrant card. Do you know what I mean? And we're always going to have those people in certain walks of life that get that little bit of power, but typically, like, who they are in any way is kind of like they're just they're not right people in any way. Honestly, I think again, I kind of get a sense that I have a privilege of working with different groups of cops to deliver one session that'll last a lifetime. It's an hour and a half with me. I take a drug user in with us as well to kind of do a little bit of the training. And definitely for me, it's about making an impression on them about don't underestimate the opportunity that you have to be able to make a difference if it's not about enforcement, by just showing people that, finding out who they are, what they're about. If you've got to lock them up with love, man. Do you know what I mean? You can still you don't have to make their lives totally difficult.
Exactly. And it's interesting. Both sides are suffering from the same cognitive dissonance, maybe, I think is the loosest way I can come to describe it, in that the police go, or some police, sorry, and we'll clarify this, we'll not be definitive with these statements. Drug users perceive that the police go, drug users are bad. You've used drugs, therefore you're a bad person, I can punish you. And then the drug users therefore see the police almost like a predator-prey situation. And so what I was saying before with the tub is that even though I've got that protection, I still see a blue light or a cop car. I still see even just the blue and the yellow high vis flash on a van past me in my periphery, and my body tenses, and I still sort of panic. And it's because there is that predator-prey sort of relationship. And if there's it's the power imbalance. The cat can play with the mouse, and the cat knows it's not going to kill the mouse, but the mouse is still like, that cat could kill me at any time. And so it's addressing that in the way I think is correct. And it's the same with you taking an active drug user into that room. It's like, you can't say, the Loch Ness Monster exists. You're taking Nessie in there and going, look. So then the cops have to believe it. They can't then deny it. They're going, well, I've spoke that person in. I don't think they're bad. And he just told me he used heroin yesterday, and he's going to go use it tonight.
Yeah.
And I don't have to feel it, physically sit with that uncomfortability, with their own prejudice, whether it be personal or professional or however it's got in there. Yeah. We all suffer from that, from the cultural biases and indoctrination through literature, media, TV, films. Always the depiction of a drug user is toward addiction. It's part of the plot that their life falls apart.
Yeah, but I think the thing for me is, and again, this is about where, like earlier I mentioned, like we have the Just Say No campaign, but schools are taking a different route and actively think about it, bringing people who use drugs into a school environment. 15-year-old kids that would never have been fucking heard of a little while back, but that's what's happening now. And again, you've got like a ministerial policies now that kind of go, still need to be tough on people who use drugs, but then you've got police forces across the UK who are actively saying, look, let's bring people who use drugs in to teach our newest officers, because we want to shape the rest of their careers based on them having an understanding of trauma. And I think this is why we need to be like really commending different places and groups for that stuff. It's kind of like that there is the recognition that whilst it's still very static and fucking linear up here and judgmental and it's about enforcement, the people who are doing the enforcing, the cops, we've got like people like retired Deputy Chief Constable Jason Harwin, do you know what I mean, who are kind of saying, bring people who use drugs in to teach my police officers, because we want them to know the truth. We want them to use the heart in their decision making, do you know what I mean? And I think that's really admirable. So what we need to do, Simpa, is we need to be making sure that our networks tap into kind of networks of people in different settings so they can go and then influence their networks, So like for me, there's a number of like amazing cops, like there was Chief Inspector Jason Q at Thames Valley Police, who recently retired. Now he's kind of working in a civilian consultancy capacity, but he's doing so much good, man, kind of connecting with ministers and other police forces and kind of making the argument for sensible drug law reforms. You've got like Neil Woods, who I know kind of spoke at your amazing event in Boburn as well. We've got like lots of voices of people from certain like disciplines and backgrounds and careers who are really like positive advocates for sensible drug law reform, and they're in their networks all chipping away at it. And I think like we're in a good place. Like what is it you say? Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. That was a quote by Henry Ford, wasn't it? Do you know what I mean? And I guess for me, like definitely what I start my days and I end my days with like I do a little bit of journaling on a morning. I write all my successes down on an evening before I kind of go to bed and all that, like strategic gains and stuff like that. What are my lessons learned? Why was that lesson important? What are my future lessons for kind of going into tomorrow? And, like I can look back on all of those lists over the last month. I've been doing this program. It's called Unstoppable 28 with a crazy Geordie fucking bloke called Paul Mort. You've got to check him out, right? He's on Facebook and stuff like that. He's a 2 times World Master Coach Award winner. He's from South Shields. He's got tattoos and a potty mouth, right? And he's such a breath of fresh air, man. And this thing that I've been doing, Unstoppable 28, what it's getting me to do in the morning is to center myself. So the first thing what I don't do in the morning is I pick this up. I don't fucking pick this up. That bullshit. I pick this up. Simba, listen to this, man. You're going to be fucking blown away, right? I pick this up and I put on some transcendental meditation, right? Where I'm doing positive mantras in the morning, every fucking morning, right? No shit, me, right? Slowing myself down for the day, that I'm hydrating, I'm drinking loads of water every fucking morning, right? I've got this little list that I'm doing around like what's the feeling that I want to create today, right? I'm kind of filling me head full of like positive intentions about what I want to do. Who do I need to be accountable for today? Do you know what I mean? And on today's list, I needed to be accountable for the peers that I was working with. Do you know what I mean? I needed to be accountable to the organizations that are giving me the opportunities to be able to do the things that I'm doing. What else am I doing? I'm cascading love. Do you know what I mean? So I'm using social networks to think about like some of the peers that I've worked with, just sending them a little message saying, I'm thinking about you. You're really fucking special. I'm filling me head and me heart with nothing but positivity, and then reflecting on that at the end of the day. And what I've seen across the last month, and I wish I'd been doing it for fucking ever, mate, is like there's a lot of really fucking amazing change happening just through somebody like me and guys like you. And I think if we all took time to not have the automatic rehearsed material around everything's fucking terrible and we're going fucking backwards and everything's shite, and we were able to look at our individual and collective fucking positive intention actions, I think we would see like we were just in a really, really great place. I've enjoyed working with Paul Mort's program so much that I've signed up for the next program, which is his 90-day mansformation. So I'm going to fucking get on that, and I'm just learning that kind of like we're products of what we tell ourselves, that you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, that kind of like loving sweet tones and kind of positive intentions are the way to do things. And I guess this is the way that I'm now choosing to do my drug law reform, me drug user advocacy, me drug user activist work, is from a position of I've got a small period of time on this fucking beautiful earth to do my best to try and make things better. And I choose to do that from a place of positivity and understanding, and recognizing that I'm in like a really privileged position to be sat here talking to you, to be able to work with people who use drugs, to have the ear of some people who can make some big changes in organizations and in terms of policies. And like, you know what, man, all of that because I fucked my life up with drinking drugs. What a fucking blessing. Thank fuck that I fucked my life up with drinking drugs. That's all I can say.
Yeah. It's a beautifully humbling thing when you can recognize the power in your pain and in struggle and in it's either a cliched little sign that people have probably seen over the years on Instagram, kicking around in the background of my fucking living room, which is life is not a destination, it's a journey. And it is, as long as you can kind of remember this constant evolution, then yeah, you never get caught up in it, you never get lost in it. And it's, some people obviously, I'm not going to say it was like the victim mentality sort of thing, but it's really easy to want to sit and lick our wounds, but then it's even easier to become obsessive and lick them to the point of making the skin raw and making the wound not heal. And it's about creating those pathways for people, those opportunities, those off-ramps, I heard is a nice term I heard quite recently. So that most people are on highways and we're just blitzing forward, and even faced with new information, new challenging experiences, there isn't a way for them to get off that lane. They can't get away from it. So the more that we can do with this to create these levels between it, because it seems that society, or maybe just even the media in this country, seems to paint it as you're either pro-hippie, everyone should take acid all the time and all the drugs, way, or everyone should be shot for fucking looking at drugs. Do you know what I mean? Like, we should be going through their Google history. They accidentally all correct the cannabis, kick the door in.
Yeah.
It's not. The vast majority of people are in the middle of rationale of this, of going, is it affecting me and harming me now? Is it affecting and harming them? Then do I give a fuck? And so the more little steps along the way, as you say, for these conversations, I've been thinking for a while of trying to, because we were doing quite well with the Cannabis Club pre-COVID, and having a physical space that people could come to once a week, spend the evening there. They could procure whatever they needed. They could get education, information. They could meet their peers. They could just chill the fuck out, and they could do it in an environment that was safe, and they could have any and all conversations. And I've been trying to think of how to do something in Durham that isn't necessarily just a cannabis club. There's just almost like a drug education center, basically just a cafe where people just actually talk about the things that we're not supposed to talk about in public. Because there is so much of this shit. And it's, as you said, there's wonderful projects that yourself is involved with where we're going, all right, there's a great intersection of sexual health, mental health, and drug use. And it's all well and good focusing on one and the other, but there's some sexual reform groups out there that they're stuck on that highway because they don't see the off ramp. They go, it increases risks, so therefore it's bad. And it's like, well, but why is it increasing risk? Can education reduce that risk? Can awareness? You know what I mean? And it's off ramps are a good thing, is what I'm advocating here. So the more we can do them through sort of conversations and the creation of these niche spaces, I think is wonderful.
Yeah.
And it really is, man.
And you've got that here, man. You've got that here, and you do it so well. I'm telling you, through your platform. Do you know what I mean? I think kind of you have like amazingly diverse guests. The journeys that you go on are absolutely fantastic. You give kind of people like me a space to kind of be able to amplify kind of the stuff that's important to me as well. You know, I don't think you can underestimate kind of like the impact that what you do has. You know, kind of like, what was this podcast number? What?
You're 98.
Fucking hell. Like, you know what I mean? You're tireless, Simpa, and you're a wonderful advocate as well. You know, I definitely think there's something about kind of like there's a lot of people who might just sit around and fucking moan about things, you know what I mean? This isn't good and that's not good. And I'm always quick to go, well, what are you fucking doing about it? You know, anyone can just sit there fucking ranting and raving about this isn't right and that's not right. Well, what are you going to do about it? And I think that, like, you represent somebody for me who's kind of doing something about it and doing something about it in a really positive way. And I surround myself with people like you, you know, it's kind of like I attach myself with the people who want to get shit done, right? And like, and we get shit done and we do it in our own different ways, you know. So no, it's good shit. I've got like another day here in Bolton tomorrow. I'm going to go and meet a nurse to talk about dry blood spot testing and line a project up for the peers here. It's school holidays, so like my wife is she's in London as we speak, watching Wicked with me two kids. They've been to the Shard this afternoon for afternoon tea, and I need to get home for the last 2 days of like school holidays. I'm going to be right in the shit. Do you know what I mean? It's got to get the balance right, don't you, between kind of work and family. So I'll be making a beeline home tomorrow night. I haven't spent the rest of the week with them, and then I'm back on a train down to London, and you may never see me again once I get on that fucking tube, because it's heightened anxiety for me, the tube line. I have a little irrational fear that I'm going to get lost and never found again.
Yeah. That was, I think, it may be a northern thing as well. We're used to, like, we've got a one track. It goes that way or that way. We know what we're doing. But yeah, I think it was probably the 5th or 6th time that I went on. I think it was maybe coming off Victoria and trying to get to King's Cross and taking, there's a dodgy thing where you've got a north and south. I didn't quite tell you. And every time I try to remember it, was about the 5th occasion where I just went, I don't give a fuck. It's 5 stops up. If I get it wrong, I turn around, I get on that, and I go the fuck back.
It's one of. Do you know what it is? I seem to kind of give us big, massive, like loads of different projects to co-produce and all of that shit. I can do that stuff pretty fine, but the idea of getting on a fucking tube with a bag and finding that I might end up in the wrong place kind of blows me mind. But no, man, it's good. Life is good, and I'm kind of just I'm blessed to be doing the things that I'm doing. One of the last things I think I should say is, so I've kind of like this idea of, I can't even explain the word, but I'll give you the explanation that I think. So like this word epistemology, right? It's kind of a word I talk about a lot, right? So about epistemological research is about kind of the study of things, how we know what we know, right? Mm-hmm. So like I've kind of been asking myself recently, when it comes to kind of like developing like treatment and support services, like how do we know what we know? How do we know that we're getting it right? Do you know what I mean? So like one of the things that I've kind of really been aware of recently is that, like, do we really consult with consumers of our services about kind of whether or not we're getting it right in terms of treatment and support, right? And I kind of don't think that we are. I don't think that we do enough when it comes to listening to the voices of people who use drugs and our services, and making sure that our services are designed for demand. So like many years ago, you used to have the National Treatment Agency. There used to be some accountability in some ways. You used to have like quarterly review panels where you had the National Treatment Agency, and you used to have drug users who sit on those panels. Then drug treatment providers would come along and talk about at a local level how they thought they were doing. And then you would have the voice of the lived experience who was going, well, you might feel like that, but it's not actually like that. Do you know what I mean, right? So there was like a lot of accountability and stuff, and I think we've lost the ability to consult with people who use drugs. I don't think we do it anymore. I don't think we do a lot of consulting with people with lots of different kinds of ailments. So it's all about the name for me, Simpa. So I thought, right, I'm going to come up with a name for something. So I've come up with this idea, which is called We Are Love, right? And the love is spelled LUV, and it stands for Liberating User Voices, and it's going to become the UK's first national network of people who use drugs. So basically what I've done is, with all those different peer groups that we've got and other drug use, got them all together in one space, and what they're going to become is drug user researchers, so they can go out into the community to those people who aren't actively in treatment and ask the questions like, why aren't you in treatment? What is it that you need that's going to help you to kind of to get you to where you want to be? So it's very early stages right now. We're going to create a long form documentary. So I've got a filmmaker from a production company who's going to coach a number of the individuals from the We Are Love group to become peer journalists, so they can tell the stories of people who use drugs from a real life perspective, video and people on cameras where we're asking them those questions as well. I went and bought the domain name, which is wearelove.org, and we're creating a landing space. I've got some kind of great support from Release. They're kind of backing it. We've got Professor Katie Holloway from the University of South Wales, who's going to teach peers to become peer researchers and do thematic researchy type stuff. So we're going to create a landing page for the website, but that's all we're creating. And we're going to say to our 96 members, this is your fucking webpage, what needs to go on it? And we're going to get a little thematic group of people who are interested in web design. We're going to coach them to be able to do that. And they design the website and make sure we can liberate user voices like that. And we're going to create a group of drug user advocates as well. So Release and their team of lawyers are going to train a small group from across the UK how to become drug user advocates. So if anyone gets their script stopped in a way in which is a little bit dodgy, we can send one of our We All Love advocates along to basically go and advocate and speak with the provider and the punter to see if we can kind of alleviate things. And if we can't, then we'll fucking escalate it. So this is my new thing. Like, I haven't got enough to be fucking doing, right? We All Love, we are liberating user voices. I'm sure there'll be a line of T-shirts, and I think it will be absolutely fantastic. And I don't actually think that We All Love should just be for people who are addicted or people who've been disenfranchised through addiction. I definitely think for me that it could maybe be a network for you and kind of maybe some of your members and stuff like that. So, you know, a way in which we could just encapsulate people who've got a thing about drugs. Do you know what I mean? And what we're going to do with the information that we get at a local level, we're going to do 4 bits of thematic research each year at a local level with every peer group on exactly the same topic. So it might be access to treatment and support, you know, like what is it like when you come into treatment support? Are you offered a range of treatment options? If so, what were they? Did you feel warm and welcomed when you came in? Do you know what I mean? Did you get offered everything that you need? If you didn't get offered everything that you need, what's the thing that's missing? Do you know what I mean? So we might ask 5 questions like that. So when we send the groups out across the 7 area planning board areas in Wales and Wigan and Liverpool and Manchester, Salford, Bury, Bolton, Trafford, Middlesbrough, all of the places, they're all going to go out at exactly the same time, ask exactly the same questions of people who use drugs in the community. Then we're going to take that data of like 10% of the treatment population of each of those areas, and we're going to do a little bit of thematic analysis on it. Then we're going to invite the commissioners to come and see us, so the Drug and Alcohol Treatment Services, and we're going to do a really important presentation to them that says, this is the questions that we asked, this is what people told us, have a look at this short 10-minute film which our peer journalists have done. So we're going to liberate the user's voice through video, because that's how we touch hearts, not through fucking loads of paper. Then we're going to have this thing which is going to be our 5 asks. So in Wigan, they'll have our 5 asks. In Wales, they'll have our 5 asks. And that's going to be what We All Love Wigan or We All Love Dyfed or We All Love Cardiff feel would make a difference under that one heading. Right, so we're going to present to the commissioner our 5 asks and ask them to take a month to think about it and then come back and tell us what they can and can't do. So the things that come back and say, well, we can definitely do these things, then as a body of people who use drugs, we're going to say, fantastic, can we co-produce that with you? And for the things that say they can't do, we're going to go, can we work with you to find the middle ground then? And then can we work with you on that? So at a local level, we get all of this data, but then what we're going to get is we're going to pull all of that information together from those 28 groups, which might well be 1,000 voices of people who use drugs. Then we're going to work with Release and with Katie to make a more polished document, which we'll then give to NHS England. We'll get under the noses of the fucking Home Office and all of the big hitters there. Still make our 5 asks, but our top level 5 asks will be a bit more heavy. Can we have these things? If we can, brilliant. Can we get involved? If we can't, why not? And how do we find the middle ground? That's my new thing, Simpa. It's not my new thing, but that's kind of been the monster which is now in the process of being created. When I haven't even got time to do what I'm doing fucking now, by the way, then that thing's coming along. But
this is why I do then hope this has inspired some people that come across this, to hear this, of partook in this podcast to want to get involved, because, you know, many hands make light work, as I often say. And it's again, it just shows you your appetite. You see wrong, you can see at least the direction that we should be going in, and then you're rounding the people up, and then by the nature of the herd, it starts to move. And so I think it's it's brilliant that we're starting to get there. And the point that you made about again, people struggling with sort of dependency issues, if they were to be the only catch-all, I think you miss a huge subset of data. If you can correlate the data set, obviously work for anomalies, you will then start to understand a few different things of, all right, why does this dependent population struggle compared with this? And then you'll be able to really pinpoint and use that live data to then actually go invest in this, invest in that. Actually, housing. Turns out if we just, rent control in one area, it means that people then don't need to steal X amount to make their fix in X area to do. A lot of it is really quite basic economics, but this whole argument has become so emotive, and I think that's why your approach is so powerful, because you're meeting emotion with emotion, and they're not angry. You're not, raising to a point where people just go deaf and they're just like, I can't hear this.
But
you reach them in other ways,
We want people to come towards us, We want people to come towards us, and those people in positions of influence. I'm not going to get commissioners to come and work with me if they experience me as just an angry Geordie bastard who's likely to make their life more fucking difficult. We've got problems, right? I accept we've got problems, but it's okay to have problems if we know that there's solutions, right? And in my experience, I won't present problems to people without solutions. The idea for We Are Lovers came out of the idea that we know that things aren't working well, but if we can go and ask the question of the people whose lives are being impacted by these things, they will know the things that they want that are going to make things better. And if in a non-threatening way, what we can do through co-production is get commissioners and purse holders and public health teams and directors of public health to start listening, then it's not that they don't want to get things right. Of course they want to get things right, but at the minute, are we designing services for demand, right? And are we, and I say this with respect, are we guessing at it a little bit? Because if what we're not doing is consulting with a minimum of 10% of the treatment population or people who use drugs, then how can we ever know that the things that we tender for or we build our services around are based on the needs of people who we aren't talking to? We're not probably to people who aren't in treatment and support. Do you know what I mean? So how are we going to find out what's best going to meet their needs if we don't physically go out into the communities and see them? So I kind of see it as for me, it's not about presenting problems without presenting those solutions, but at the same time recognizing that when we empower a cohort of people that I work with who've been told they're not good at anything, and all of a sudden we say, well, you're going to become a peer researcher, or you're going to go down to London and work with fucking Release, and we're going to train you up to become a drug user advocate, and we're going to pay you fucking your expenses down there, and put you in a hotel. We also start to make these people feel fucking like they've got a place in the world, So then when they go out into the communities and they're talking to their mates who are disenfranchised, and all of a sudden they're saying, oh, I'm a peer researcher with fucking We Are Love, or I'm a naloxone champion working with Kaleidoscope or Greater Manchester NHS Foundation Trust. For that person who's got no hope on the ground, he goes, or she goes, God, I'd love to do something like that. And you go, well, fucking come on then. Come and join the team while I'm still using drugs. So fucking what? So fucking what? That's an asset to these projects, So we start to just kind of reposition everything in a way in which is about everybody kind of gets well in some ways. All of the team come along fucking together. We don't leave anybody behind. We show tolerance and understanding for the unconscious biases and the way in which kind of people have been commissioned, So I don't know, man. Fucking, it's mint. Simpa, it's mint, and we just need to keep going. And then do this podcast again, maybe in fucking a year's time, and because of me meditation, I'll have knee hair, and I'll be all fucking going armed up.
Yeah, I like it. You won't even need to dial in on Zoom. You'll just transcendentally just appear here. Yeah.
Follow the white rabbit, Simpa. Follow the white rabbit.
Oh man. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, as I always do, and I'm always left with a sense of, I hope how those kids feel, or those cops, or anyone that you speak to, with hope, with just the awareness that, yeah, you're right. We have to reframe and celebrate our victories, and we have to remember the humanity of the spectrum of every stakeholder. I hate that modern term, but everyone that's involved in this, be it a cop, be it a sober person, be it someone struggling with dependency or just curious. We all have something to gain and lose from this, and I think the police, we've said for a while, are a good strategy, because if we can stop them attacking us, then they can start to listen to us, then they can start to work with us, and then our communities stop falling apart. Then we don't have to do half the work we do, and then it becomes about just celebrating the weird, the wonderful, and the wacky that is. often the people that are disenfranchised, as you say, that are pushed to the fringes of our society. And it's wonderful that people like yourself are doing, frankly, as I've always said, just amazing work to be out there and just every day, man, just slogging away. And it's every day you are making a difference. And as you said, it's exponential. You talk to 100 fucking kids, you know what that kid does who that hung around to talk to you? He goes and talks to 10 mates. They talk to 20 mates. They talk to 30 mates. And all of a sudden, you potentially stopped an overdose in an area. You've potentially stopped someone falling into a position where they could have, passed out and been vulnerable. Do you know what I mean? It's that active daily changes that are, it's like ripples in a pond. You know what I mean? And it's tiny stones, but it just spreads, man. It just fucking spreads.
Cool, man. And like for me, Simba, it's like I'm just like fucking honestly, like I'm just like I'm one guy who's been fucking gifted with these opportunities. Do you know what I mean? Like, but like I didn't kind of arrive here by chance. When I was broken and I was a mess, I had a fucking guy who came towards me and put his arm around my neck, and he scrubbed me head. He's a guy in recovery from addiction as well. And he said, "You little bastard," he says, "I'll help you for a fucking year, but it's conditional." And I was broken, man. I was going, I'll do anything, like just to have the fucking love of this man. He said, "I'll help you for a year on the condition that when you get better, you go and do for one other person what I've done for you." That's the promise, just one thing. And like fucking for me, I promised him then. That guy died, like Sean, he was a great guy. But you know what? I don't just do it for one person, I kind of do it for like everyone that I meet, because like showed me that I meant something, that I was worth something, that he fucking believed in me. And you know what? And they're at the kind of the cornerstones of everything that I do, right? Is like you hear me talking always about love, man, and about the importance of connection and hope, right? Now, you don't have to go to college to study that shit, right? That exists within fucking all of us, right? We can all make a difference, like right now, for our, not just people who are addicted to drugs, just for people, man. Just for fucking people, we're in a fucking really tough time right now where if we can just start being a little bit more loving and compassionate towards each other, the world's going to become a fucking much better place, you know what I mean? And I guess that I have to extend that love and compassion and understanding to lots of different kinds of people, and that's cops and everything else, I guess like I just have to try and be a bit of a mirror for what I want fucking, how I want other people to be, and if that's what my life's journey's been about, do you know what I mean? Then I'm fucking blessed, man. I'm blessed to be in a position to fucking do it. And I really mean that, It's like, it's nice to get paid. It's nice to have nice things. But it's not the thing that fucking orientates me or fucking makes me do what I do, It's people feeling like they go away from a little bit of time with me feeling like the matter. That shit's priceless, man.
Yeah, man. Entirely. And I think... that's a beautiful place to end this podcast, to be fair. You got two choices here, I suppose, that you can either go and I'll do housekeeping, or I do housekeeping and you can hang around.
Yeah, just do housekeeping, I'll hang around. I'll watch you in your excellence, Simpa. I'll just sit back and watch you.
Yeah, excellent. Well, yeah. Thank you again. Yeah, there you go, folks. That's George Charlton. We'll include a lot of links below. I've got many of the news articles that we discussed earlier as well, so them in there. Something in my head actually wanted to clarify. It's worse, the deaths. It was 4,859, not 4,589.
Yeah.
But so yeah, just wanted to put that on there in case somebody in the comments going to call it. But yeah, other than that, I'm quite happy with the factual record with this, folks. If you do find any issues or you want to have a further conversation, by all means, hit me up. I'm here to learn. I'm here to grow. If you've got any other further guests, obviously, as we reach out beyond, obviously, this little cannabis bubble of ours, do please get on it. I'm not going to curse that. I was going to say I've just booked my 100th guest. And I'm not going to tell you who it is because I haven't got the confirmation email from their person yet. So I'm not going to tell you who the next the guest will be for guest 100. So you're going to have to just wait for that one, folks. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to help fund it, please take us out on patreon.com/Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee or a pint or whatever your dose of your narcotic or illicit substance may be, you can help keep the lights on in this project of mine. As you can probably see by how shiny I am. There's several lights on today, so it's getting more and more expensive, but it's bloody cost of living crisis. But yeah, check us out all social media platforms at the Simpa Life. You've been beautiful, folks. We'll see you next week with a guest, and you'll love it. It'll be Halloween as well, so do something, dress up. Shit, am I gonna have to dress up? I might dress up because it's Halloween next week. I'll figure that one out. All right, peace out, folks. This little curl of hair is gonna do my head in the whole way through this recording.
Very Clark. It's very Clark Kent,
isn't it? Yeah.